and welcome to San Diego Media Pros. This month's production horror story comes from me again, since I have so many. Yay! We were doing a 48-hour film project a few months ago, and we had a studio that North County Media Center that volunteered their space for our little group, and we wrote out the story so that it had a hotel room in it, a motel room in it. And we go into the entry area of the motel, and I go, this is going to be perfect. And I have a group of people who are there to turn it into a motel room, and I say, this will be great. We'll put the bed here. We have a flat or two that we can put over there, and the bedside table, and we can hang a picture, and they all get to work on it. We work for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then somebody comes up to me and says, you know, there's a sliding glass door right here that would be the patio for this hotel room. And I suddenly realize I've set the entire thing up backward. And I stopped everybody and said, everybody, I'm an idiot. We're going to turn everything around and look out the door. And so I wasted my entire crew's first 45 minutes on the set, and we started over. But the results are good, so that's what matters, right? So that's my production horror story. The other notes I have are, don't plug a microphone into a DSLR and then have the microphone turned off. That's bad. And there is no such thing as a trained cat. And I'm going to give you 4 production horror stories this month. I was working on a project where a police car is driving around like a lunatic and driving around a block, basically. And I'm in the back seat directing, and so the cameras are on the hood shooting into the car, shooting the passenger, and I'm behind the passenger. So in order to not be seen, I have to be covered with a big piece of black fabric, and I'm looking down into a monitor as the car is going, and we're going around the corners fast enough that I'm literally sliding across the seat into the sound guy, and by the end of it, he is sitting sideways with his foot on my hip and his hand on my shoulder, holding me to the other side of the car. I yelled, cut. The driver stopped, and the sound guy said, get the F out. Because apparently my door opened and his door didn't, and there was some danger of me being in the way of certain projectile bodily functions. We both got out of the car, and I said, you know what, I think we're done with those shots. So there's your production horror stories. Welcome, everyone. My name is Mike Brueggemeyer, and I'm president of San Diego Media Pros. Thank you, and please don't do that again. It creeps me out. Please like us on Facebook. We are now on LinkedIn. We are now on Meetup. Hunt us down and find us. Additionally, when you see video folks out in the world, let them know about us. This is a pretty valuable group to have behind you when somebody asked me earlier about, do you know somebody who does this? Well, this is a pretty good resource to have at your beck and call. Additionally, I've gotten plenty of phone calls saying, hey, we need somebody to come out and do this, and can you come out? And so I've made more than my membership fees and income due to this group. I'm actually the poster child, but that's another whole longer story. So refer us, refer San Diego Media Pros. I'm going to go to my little note here. These are the new members of San Diego Media Pros. They just became members, and this is awesome. Patrick Hartley, Brandon Worley, David Keltner, Renee Fox, Jacqueline Hook, Jane Hare, Steve Becker. All of you, well done. Thank you. And I have worked with Brandon Worley. If you need help on a project, he's awesome. And then the other note that I have for you is we are having a holiday soiree, a Christmas seasonal party, however you want to word it. This year it's going to be on December 10th at Tom Ham's Lighthouse. So save that date. Additionally, next month's meeting is our member showcase. So if you are a member, put together a 3-minute snippet of your work and submit it to president@sdmediapros.org. Send me a link, send it Hightail or Dropbox or whatever way you can get it to me. And I will make sure that we download it and get it into the program so you can have your work seen by a whole bunch of professionals who can see your work and hire you, hopefully. I want to thank Video Gear for sponsoring San Diego Media Pros. They're always awesome. One of the coolest things about Video Gear is they have the technology to get your shoot done, but they also are a great resource for figuring out the technology to get your shoot done. If you have a shoot that you need to do, you might want to run by what the shoot's about so that they can recommend cameras and equipment, because they're really knowledgeable about cameras. They're a great resource for that. I've actually been talked out of things a number of times where they've said, you know what, you might not want that set of lights, you might want this set of lights. And I've been thrilled every single time. Tips and tricks. Please send your production horror stories and tips and tricks to president@sdmediapros.org. Creativity. Sleep on it. Wash dishes. Go drive. There's something valuable about putting your brain on some other task to free up your subconscious to work on a script. When I was in college, one of the processes that our writing teacher had was not only write your idea, but talk about when you did it and how it came to you so that you could be aware of when you are creative and how you are creative. And I discovered that I, at that point, was coming up with creative ideas solely when driving, and I was a danger on the road. Producing. When working out of town, interview via Skype. When you have to hire somebody to edit something out of town, check them out on Skype or what's the screen sharing thing on Apple? FaceTime. And have them, I worked on a project a long time ago where the editor said, oh yeah, I'm really good at Final Cut. And he had never been on Final Cut. And totally killed us. So that way you can actually sit there and say, hey, cut a piece in, and watch them do it and see how well they can do it. Directing. Learn to tell a story. And that story is not on film, but it's the story that you want to get across with the film, so that your crew and your actors can understand the story behind it and not just the instructions of, I want the camera here, I want the lights here. You want to express the story so that they can get the feeling of it so that you can get their best, as opposed to just doing exactly what you need them to do. Cinematography. Camera movement is awesome. You know what else is awesome? Having the camera come to a stop. And I'm not saying use a tripod and have a static camera. I'm saying that when you have the camera moving, if you want to emphasize a moment, have the camera land. It's a great storytelling device. Everything gets more important when that camera stops. Equipment. If you purchase one thing, buy a C-stand. I was on a shoot this past week, and I was watching people set this up wrong, so I'm going to set this up right and show you how. Stand behind the stand. If you are setting up a flag or whatever, a light over there, you want the knuckle on your right. You want this other knuckle on your right. You want to extend the pull out. You want to make it so that, since this is on the right of the stand, as it pushes down, this knuckle will tighten and it won't fall. If you do it the other way, if it's on your left and you tighten it down here And there's weight on this end, and as it falls, it's going to get looser and fall faster. And that's how people get hurt. So keep it on the right. Also, put your weight out over a leg, and then put the sandbag on that leg so that the sandbag is pushing in a direct line against the weight that's extended off the pole. I use C-stands a lot this way. Mount a light out here, put a smaller sandbag here. And that way, when you push the stand up, the weight is not all the way forward, it's balanced out. And now somebody's going to get hurt on that C-stand, so I'm going to put it down, make sure that that doesn't poke anybody in the eye.
Mike,
Yes?
I've been on a couple of shoots with crews of 30-something, and I noticed the lack of sandbags on the C-stand, and was told that they thought that sandbags were a luxury, not a necessity.
So is insurance. If you work on a bigger chute and you have a grip truck, you never leave the truck without the C-stand and the sandbag because they're one item. Same thing is true of a light. When you grab a light, you need to grab the wire, the scrims that go with it. If you don't, you're doing it wrong. Excellent point. Editing. If you have a big long time lapse, like of a process or something, I'm working on one right now, and I have a big old time lapse of this thing being installed. It's really boring for large portions of it, so I can cut out entire chunks. So when they get to this point in the process, and then the two guys stand over here at the table going like this, and I can't really see what the hell they're doing, I can just cut out that big chunk, and so they walk over the table and they go back and carry on with the process. And nobody's going to know or care, they're just going to see the process moving quicker. The only issue with that is if you're shooting it outdoors, and the shadows may jump from over here to over there. Compositing, motion blur. Use motion blur. If you're going to move text, put motion blur on it so that it looks like it's moving naturally. Particularly if you're doing text that's moving with video, if you're compositing a piece of text onto somebody walking, if you don't have motion blur on it, it's going to be all jaggedy, and everything else is going to be smooth, so add motion blur. Voiceover. Whenever you're in the booth, record a demo of something different. A movie trailer, a new character, a different pitch. As long as you have the recording thing going on, just do a line or something. And what you may find out is after you do that 6 or 8 times, you'll end up with 3 or 4 things that you can add to your demo that work out for you. Again, if you have tips or tricks or production horror stories, please send them to me, president@sdmediapros.org. One thing I do want to hit at again, I've talked to you guys about this before, but I'm going to tell you again. The MCAI is our national association. San Diego Media Pros is our local chapter of MCAI. The MCAI Media Festival is accepting applications right now. So you can have your work reviewed by your peers from some other chapter in the country. And they give out awards, and it's a great way you actually get the judges' feedback, which is really cool. You get to see what other people in the profession think when they look at your work. So if for no other reason, that's a great reason to enter your work into the MCAI Media Festival. All right, at the end of this whole presentation, we are going to be giving this out, Learning Pro Tools 11. I am going to pick a random trivia question, and the first person who answers is going to win, and I'm not telling the question to anybody, so if you're a trivia fan, stay here. That's going to happen after our presentation. So Mike Towe is our presenter, our lead presenter tonight.
Leave it to a director to bring a C-stand to an editing meeting. For those of you that I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Mike Towe. I run M2 Digital Post. It's a post-production and production shop out in Santee. I was one of the 2 people that were responsible for putting this meeting together tonight. The other was Jeff Trober, who's taking my picture right now. And I am also the sponsorship director for the San Diego Media Pros. So if you want to advertise with us, send an email to sponsorship@SDMediaPros.com and I will get it. First off, I'll start by apologizing for my rather scruffy look. I'm growing this out for a Halloween costume, and it's at that awkward stage right now. It's gone past sexy stubble. It's not quite epic hipster. Right now, it's kind of like a homeless Greyhound station. Tonight we're going to be talking about editing and a lot of times in editing, you know, you're trying to tell a story, you're trying to be a great storyteller, you're trying to work with pacing and rhythm and all that fun stuff, and that's great. But the other thing that you a lot of times have to do as an editor is be a handyman or a handywoman, and you've got to fix the fence, you've got to unclog the toilet, you've got to do all of that kind of stuff. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. I had a whole paper of printed up bios for the folks that are going to be talking to you tonight, and I don't know what the hell happened to it. It got lost. So I will say that the 2 speakers that are speaking tonight, Dave Schweitzer I've known for a very long time. Dave is an amazing editor, also just a really nice guy. And if you're looking for a freelancer, and you're looking for a freelancer that's not going to make your clients unhappy, Dave Schweitzer is one of the guys in town to do that. The other one that's speaking tonight, he's actually going to start it out, is Patrick Espinoza. And I just met Patrick not long ago at the Premiere Pro users group. And you have quite an extensive background both in video and audio with some radio work, right? Yeah. Some behind the scenes stuff. So Patrick's going to start it out with some stuff in Premiere. Put your hands together for him, folks.
And as a guy that mostly shoots, this is not the way you mic somebody up. And I like that I can hide behind the screen because I really don't like speaking in front of people. So tonight, I work mostly in Premiere, and I'm mostly a shooter, and I edit most of my own stuff, corporate-related things. So what I'm going to show tonight are just ways to make your footage look better. You know, when you have a shot that's got bad white balance or bad exposure, the things I'm going to show are probably a little more on a rudimentary level, and then Dave will kind of take over with some of the more nuts and bolts things with After Effects and stuff like that. So I'll just kind of get started with what I had on my thing here. Let's make sure this all works here. Starting out with 2 shots from the same shoot in the same camera that were somehow shot seconds apart from each other, but the white balance is completely off on them. And the first shot looks pretty good, and I don't know how well it shows up on that monitor there, because it almost looks more correct on that screen than it does over here, but I'll just kind of pretend like that one's a little out of whack right now. So on my screen, this looks a little bit on the reddish side. So a lot of times what people tend to do is they might go into the fast color corrector and drop that effect onto the, let's see if I can get this, it's not clicking on here. There we go. And there's a white balance control, whoops, sorry about that, that you can just, take an eyedropper and you find somewhere in the shot that's kind of white, but you don't want to go too white because it might not necessarily be actually white, it might be a blown out part of the image. So you could do that, or you could pick a part that is a neutral gray color. But the only problem with that is that it tends to be pretty variable. No matter what spot you pick, you can get something that should be white balanced, but it might be off a little bit. So I like to actually do it more in a manual way, and I like to use Magic Bullet Looks, which is kind of my go-to plugin. I know a lot of people like to use Colorista, but Magic Bullet Looks actually has the Colorista 3-wave color correction in it, and it has a bunch of other adjustments that, yeah, it's made by Red Giant Software. They're the same guys that make Colorista. And I think they kind of position the software as one where you can just grab these kind of pre-baked looks and you can do all sorts of you know, stylized things to your footage. But there's actually a bunch of controls over here on the right side that give you a lot of control over what you can do to the image. So one of the most basic ones that they have is called warm and cool, which is the one feature I wish that Colorista actually had, because basically all it does is it gives you a color temperature control with this warm and cool adjustment. And if you can see over here, I have the waveform monitor displayed with the RGB parade, and you can kind of see that you got a little more red than you do green and blue, so it is showing you that the shot is kind of balanced a little bit more to the red. So when you move the warm and cool adjustment around, you can see that it's actually pivoting the red and the blue channels around. And then if you move the tint control, it's actually pivoting the red and the green channels around. So by using a combination of these two adjustments, you can actually get your shot white balance very quickly. And also using the vector scope that's also shown underneath. And I don't know how many people use these regularly, but I've been in the business for almost 30 years, so I started out as a videotape operator and used to have to line up bars and tone with a waveform monitor on every tape that you stuck on a reel or put on into a deck. So basically, here's the built-in waveform monitor that's in Premiere. I'll just give you guys a quick explanation that it's showing you the brightness levels of your image, where down here at the bottom is the darkest parts of the image, and up here is the top part. And as you look left to right, it's giving you a kind of a visual representation of what you're seeing across the screen here. If I go back and put on the color bars here, you can actually see that, I don't know how well that's showing up there, but you can see the brightness levels going, you know, from brighter down to darker, because that's showing what the actual luminance values are of this color bar here. And if you switch over to the vector scope, it's actually showing you little dots within these boxes that you use to calibrate your color, and if the color's off, it'll be shifted one way or the other, so you use this to kind of get yourself in line. So when you're trying to do a color balance adjustment with looks, you can go in here and use a combination of both of these scopes, because what the vector scope does is as you get farther out onto the scope, that's more color saturation, and then as you go down to the bottom here, that's nothing. So if you had just a black and white image, you'd only see information right in the very center of the scope. So if you're properly white balanced, you're going to see a lot of information. If there's a lot of white in the screen, that's going to kind of balance towards the center. And when you use this warm and cool adjustment, you'll start to see in the vector scope, you'll start to see it kind of moving back and forth down around the center here, which is right here. And just by kind of getting that centered up as closely as you can, you actually get yourself in a much better state of white balance. And if you look right here in the waveform, you're seeing this kind of a hard edge line, and actually what that is the boat right here, which actually has more blue in it. So this stuff that you're seeing here is more of the white. So this kind of gets you a little bit more in line. You know, it's kind of a subtle change, but it gets you more accurate. And then when you have to go and balance with another one here, you can kind of see what the difference is by looking. Like here, you can see that it's a lot more out of balance. So what I'm going to do is leave this previous shot up here on the screen. I'm going to open up another instance of looks on the new clip, and trying to move this out of the way a little bit so we can kind of see that image here. The problem with this screen is that we had to plug into a VGA screen, so I had to squeeze everything together, and we don't have as much screen real estate as we normally have here. So using the warm and cool adjustment again, you can see down here that there's nothing in the very center of this scope, and there should be since there's quite a lot of white and gray. So moving the temperature and tint back and forth, you can see that it kind of moves itself up and back and left and right here, and then you just kind of do a little combo here, and before you know it, you're kind of lined up where you're pretty even with your other shot. And you can kind of toggle back and forth and see now that we're pretty lined up by just doing a pretty fast adjustment. So if you toggle on and off, you can see that you know, it really shifted the image quite a bit. Same thing with this one. This was a shot where you've got daylight white balance, but you're shooting into the shade, so it comes up shooting cooler, and if you spin the camera around 180 degrees, you're in sunlight. So what do? You keep switching your white balance on your camera back and forth every time you shift back and forth. So you got to kind of pick one of them to go with. So in this case, lock the camera down on daylight white balance and just figured I'll correct this shaded stuff later. So it's going to be a little easier to see this effect because we've got a white canopy here to work with now. So when you're looking at this waveform monitor now, you can actually see the white from the canopy. Let me actually zoom this down so you can see the whole image here. So right here, here, and here is the canopy, which you can see is looking too blue. So if we open up the warm and cool effect again and just start sliding it until it balances, you can see now the red and the blue channels are balancing, and the green is down a little bit. So we just move the tint control up a little bit, and then just kind of back and forth just slightly until now all three of these channels are lined up, and now we've got a pretty good white balanced image pretty fast. Go back and forth, you can see the blue kind of came out, and if we try to toggle back and forth between the shots, you can see that the color looks a lot better now. And like I'd say the only thing I would end up adding to this shot would be maybe to change the exposure, because you can see that it looks a little dark on this scope. So that's one of the other controls that you can pick in here. You have exposure. You could also use the Colorista three-way color corrector if you're familiar with that, but usually exposure is just a good extra one you can add on. You can stack all these effects up, and I'll be showing you some other things with Magic Bullet as we go further along in here, but you can just kind of raise the level up a little bit until it matches better with the next shot, and now we've got a pretty good match. And you know, when you practice it enough, you can get these shots lined up in just a few seconds. So I hope I'm not sounding too gearheady. I have a tendency to kind of sidetrack here, so if I'm like going over people's heads, feel free to stop me and ask questions. This is another shot where it was shot with pretty nasty looking fluorescent lighting, but we've got enough white in the shot here that we can use that to try to correct it as well. Same way, and to me, I think it's probably the easiest way to color correct anything by just using the.
Why is it not called color correction?
Well, it's just one of the tools within color correction. And if there's anybody in here that does a lot of still photography and uses Adobe Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, it's basically the same control that you get on the side where it has the color temperature and the tint control. If you have a raw image that you've shot with bad white balance, you can just take that dial and dial it in. It's basically the exact same shot. So same kind of thing with this. It's just like very quick to just go in and get your white balance back in line. So, oh, question?
So, yeah, the process you're using is you're first trying to line up the circular scope in the middle, and then you're worrying about the RGB, like
You can kind of go, you can go either way. It kind of depends on what's in the image. And actually, now that I clicked on this, I probably should have showed you this shot first. This is a 3-step gray chart that when I'm out on a shoot, I usually shoot about 5 seconds of this because it's actually a calibrated chart that has perfect white, gray, and black values on it. So when you look at this one on a scope, it's going to look a lot more obvious. Actually, if I, maybe not so much obvious on there. I need to blow that up a little bit, I think, or maybe.
You actually white balance on that?
Yeah, you can. If you white balance off that chart to begin with, then you'll be like pretty much right on the money to start with, and then from there you can just make little minor adjustments. But actually, yeah, you can see it better in the scopes here. Like you can definitely see the white, the gray, and the black chips on this waveform display right here. So this camera was actually white balanced right off the chart, and you can see it's like just very slightly reddish up in the highlights, but it's like pretty much right on the money. And so yeah, so to answer your question, if you're white balancing off of like a chart like this, you can really see what happens when you adjust one way or the other. That you can either use this, like I tend for a shot like this one, it's real obvious, I'll probably white balance more off of the waveform monitor than I will off the vector scope, but you can still see when you look down here that most of your information should kind of line up right in the center for it to be properly balanced, because if you start going off in one direction or the other, it's going to start getting really nasty looking. But then one of the other things you can do then with this chart is you can help build a look with it using the normal colorista color correction thing, where you can actually adjust the midtones up and down to change the gamma settings of the image. But you'll see they do kind of all interact with each other. So if you lower the gamma down a little bit, you're going to have to bring the highlights back up to hit the 100% mark, or the shadows, so you can kind of fix it to get it to be where you want, and then you can copy and paste these settings, into your clips. So in this case, here's the raw clip off the camera from that white balanced image, and this was shot on a Canon C100 in the wide DR mode, so it tends to shoot a little bit flatter. Like if anybody uses a DSLR camera and uses the Technicolor CineStyle profile, or one of those that kind of flattens your image, it helps to regain some of the dynamic range up in the highlight area, but it also sometimes pulls the blacks up too. So let's go back here and just kind of like set this up a little bit here with the colorista chart. So you can see, if you're looking at these waveforms, you can see that the blacks don't go all the way down to the zero line on the scope. So we just take the shadows and just kind of bring them down a little bit. The reflected whites off this chart should actually be at this 80 IRE setting. You don't really want them to be all the way up at the top, and then the midtones can really be, it's kind of up to the taste of what you want. If you want it to look a little brighter, if you want to make it look a little richer, you can take it down a little bit. So what you could then do is then copy those settings and paste the attributes into your next clip, where in Premiere you get the option to select your plugins that you want. If you have multiple ones, Final Cut does the same thing, and then you plug it in there, and you can see that it just made that little fix. So it's it's kind of subtle, but it's enough that it kind of looks a little bit milky just right off the truck. But then as soon as you add that one little correction in there, it kind of makes it look a little bit richer. You can add some more saturation to it if you want. There's a hue and saturation control that you can just kind of dial in if you want it to look a little bit more saturated. Again, that's just all to personal taste, but that's one of the things that I like with with Magic Bullet Looks is that you can do all of this stuff just within the one plugin. If you want to say that the background's maybe a little too bright behind him, you can add a vignette. And so what they've done is they've actually kind of made these little settings down here at the bottom that kind of represent, like, you know, if you were actually shooting with the camera, you would put a graduated filter, you know, on the lens to adjust the exposure, or you'd put something, a vignette filter in there, so you can drag it on here and then make adjustments to the size of it, the shape. You can make it round, you can make it oval, and you can move it around, so then you're really emphasizing the subject in the shot versus the background to pull your attention more towards the subject there. So, you know, so all of these corrections were just done in this one plugin right here. And depending on the processor speed, you can run it without having to do any rendering at all. So, see what else I've got down here. So this is another type of a chart. So that's one thing I was going to talk about. I actually brought a couple of visual aid things here. Talking about white balancing off of this chart, it's good if you can use a calibrated chart, because a lot of times people will white balance off of, like, this Porta-Brace card is the one that comes with the Porta-Brace cases that, you know, or a news photographer has probably used for the last 30 or 40 years. Or you might white balance off of a white sheet of paper or a napkin. But if you look at these, you can see all three of these are different shades of white. So which one of them's actually accurate? You know, and the answer is none of them are. Actually, you need, you know, one that's an actual calibrated chart, which is, these are made by X-Rite. They're the guys that make those big color chip charts that you see for still photography too, and they're the same guys that make this three-step one too. So these are actual calibrated white, gray, and black. So if you buy one of these charts and you white balance off of it and then actually shoot a few seconds of this, then you can go back and post and make any minor adjustments to your shot. Because what I've noticed with my cameras, if I preset my white balance to daylight and white balance off of one of these charts, the blue channel ends up coming up a little bit too high. You know, it should be right in line, but if I manually white balance, it comes out perfect. So it seems like the preset one should be perfect when you're out in daylight, but it's not. So it's good to shoot with a chart like this, just to have that as a reference to use when you're in post, because, like, you know, in this case, we shot this chart right before we did the interview, and I didn't have to change the color. All I did was just make some adjustments to the black level.
What was who made those?
X-Rite. Actually, this is like the old version. Gretag Macbeth was the old name, but now it's...
Is that zero black or is that video black?
It's like a video black. I know... Yeah, it's not on the back of these. Sometimes they actually had what the values were, but they're off a little bit. Like when I'm shooting with my Canon C100 in log mode, this actually the black shows up at 10 IRE, the gray shows up at 35, and the white shows up at 70. And then you can use that. You can actually set your exposure off the gray. This is an 18% gray chart, which is a pretty standard chart that still photographers use to set exposures, and it is the same. This is supposed to be an 18%. It actually looks a little darker, but if you set your exposure usually off of this gray chip, you'll most of the time be right in the ballpark with your exposure, especially outdoors, I've noticed. So so same deal. I was going to show more of this kind of manipulation with Magic Bullet Looks to just, like, this was shot in log format, so this is where you can actually see that the shot looks very flat. And the reason why I shot this in log was because this was a catalog shoot for a wig company that goes and does their wig catalogs, and they always want to have a behind-the-scenes shoot of the photo shoot. So I'm dealing with the strobe lights and the modeling lights, and so they get to be pretty bright. And when you shoot in log, it actually helps retain a lot of that highlight detail that would get blown out if you were using just a normal camera. So if you look at the waveform display here, you can see that the white is very dark and the black is not quite down to the bottom. So if I throwing the look on there. It looks like I actually had one on there already, but you can do the same thing. Like this background behind them was a white background, so you can actually see it here that it's a little reddish, so you could put an adjustment in here to fix that a little bit. Just kind of bringing that up, but what this shot really needs is it needs the exposure to be brought up, and it needs the black levels brought down. So I'm going to drop in the Colorista 3-way corrector, which, you know, anyone that's used Colorista, that's the exact same control. Bring the whites.
Is there an eyedropper in that?
No, there isn't one in this. The Colorista has an eyedropper, and it doesn't have the warm and cool adjustment, which is what I wish that it had, because if it did, I would probably end up using Colorista a lot for just like brute force color correction stuff. And it goes back to what I was saying about the eyedropper. I never trust the eyedropper to give you a correct color anywhere unless you know for sure. Like in this shot, I probably would trust it because I know that background here was actually white when it was photographed. So, you know, it's coming out as a neutral gray right now, just because the video lighting is so much darker than what the strobe lights are doing when they're firing off. So, you know, just take the shadows down, and now we're still looking a little dark, so in this case we'll bring the midtones up on this shot, and then maybe add some saturation to it, just to give it some punch. And actually, to me on my screen, her skin tones look a little bit green. Oh, so that's one thing here is on the vector scopes, they actually have a line that goes between, I don't know what colors those are. Might be green over there. They're not showing it on this scope, but skin tones are, as a rule, supposed to line up on this line over here. So if you use a hue adjustment, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Let's try it this way. And go here then. Actually, now our skin tones are more in line. You can see that it really didn't need that much saturation. It just needed maybe a teeny bit of it there. So now we've gone from, you know, the flat looking shot right out of the camera to a color graded shot, and it looks, you know, much better than it did. And actually, you know, it looks, you know, pretty polished there. So one other instance I was going to show with this was to kind of create a different lighting look. I kind of showed you that with the vignette a little bit, if you want to try to put the focus on the subject. But you know, what if you want it to look a little bit more like, you know, like you had a side light kind of coming in, you put a flag over on the one side to kind of make just the top dark. You know, when you're doing a vignette, it's just going to only just do everything in a circular pattern. So one of the
Patrick, can you work on her forehead?
is it on there? That's not as bright on here, but I think that's just the problem with these screens. In fact, that screen looks a lot more saturated than that one does to me over there too. But actually, no, here's what. So another thing that you can do here is you can put grad exposure adjustments on this image, which it's almost like if you're using a matte box with a filter and you put a graduated filter and drop it in and kind of rotate it in one direction. With Magic Bullets, you can go and do this any direction you want. I'll show you, like, you can just reduce the level. So that's what a normal graduated filter would probably look like if you just stuck it right in the camera, straight down. But in here, you can actually move it anywhere you want. So let's just say we want to just drop the level down a little bit here, just make it look like we put a flag over there just to kind of darken the image down. And so by just a combination of kind of pushing and pulling it, you can kind of make it look a little bit more subtle. So then that way it's not just making a circular pattern, it's just kind of acting on the back here. And let's just say this over here might be a little darker than what we'd like, so we can add another either grad exposure or a spot exposure. A lot of times you'd use the spot exposure to fix a bad exposure on somebody's face, and I'm going to actually show that next after this, but in this case I'm going to use this spot exposure just to simulate that there's another light that we put over here. And again, where you just kind of play with the shape of it and the fall off amount, you can make it look kind of convincing that there's just another little bit of light there. You can kind of just put it over this way, so you can definitely kind of just fix up your shot a little bit more from how it just looked just flat, that still is drawing more attention to the subject than the background, but just kind of makes it look like you might have had a few more lights and grip gear than you actually went there with. Like in the case of this shot, the client I work with on these, they usually only give me like 30 minutes to set up, and I'm there by myself. So I'm having to set camera, lights, sound in 30 to 45 minutes. So, you got to do it pretty quick and to try to make it look good. It's not always going to... Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's, if you know that she's not going to move a lot, you're okay. If she were to back her head over into this corner here, then it would actually get a little brighter over on that side. So, in this case, she didn't move at all.
Now that
so
we have the new network, it allows
so,
teachers the opportunity to use...
So you can kind of get away with it on a static shot. This one here is a sample of if you got bad back or like high backlighting and your exposure was kind of bad, and this was another case of like we're at the end of the day on this shoot and had to go really fast, and all of the previous interviews were shot with cloudy sky, so the contrast was totally different. Then all of a sudden the sun came out, so we wanted to put this guy underneath an awning at this housing development, and so it just turned out that in order to keep the highlights from completely blowing out, I had to underexpose his face, but I knew that I'd be able to pull the shot back in post. So there's a couple of different ways you can go about this, and you don't always have to go to Magic Bullet Looks for this. So one of the ways that you can try to save the shot is with a built-in filter in Premiere called Shadow and Highlight. And when you drop that on, what it does is it basically works with the bottom end of the image and the top end, and it gives you kind of a default amount when you first put it on that, it kind of makes it look a little bit better, but it can still use a lot of work. So you can uncheck this auto amounts button here, and then you have control for your shadow amount and your highlight amounts. Let's just take them back down to 0. So here is the original shot here, and if you just dial in the shadow amount and you watch the waveform monitor over on the left side, you can see it's not pulling the blacks up, but it's working with the lower part of the image just to kind of goose it up a little bit, and you can get it to be somewhere that looks pretty decent. And then the highlight amount, you use that to just kind of take the background down, and you can kind of save the shot that way. To me, it looks a little bit pasty, but if you didn't have any plugins, this might be one way to do it. Another way to work with it is with the RGB curves command, and this one can be kind of tricky. You can get into trouble pretty quick if you don't know what you're doing with this, but you can try by just first you grab the center of it and you pull, and basically what it's doing is it's taking a linear curve from your darkest to brightest and kind of making it more logarithmic, and by picking where your pivot point is, it acts more on the highlights than it does on the dark parts of the image, so you can kind of pull it around until you get something that looks pretty decent. And so what I would probably do with this shot is maybe leave it there, and then I would go into Magic Bullet Looks and put a vignette on the background just to kind of save it, because it's just too blown out. But another effect that I kind of just discovered when I was trying to figure out what to do for this demo was using another built-in Premiere effect called lighting effects, which in the past I've only used it just for doing like special effects types of things with, like if you have a screenshot of a computer screen that's a still shot that you need to kind of move around. They usually look kind of boring, so if you take one of these lighting effects, you can kind of give it some texture. But by default, what it does is it gives you this spotlight effect here. There's up to 5 different lights that you can use, so it gives you one for starters that's set in spotlight mode, and then there's controls for moving it around here in space, so you can see, you know, like you would use the spotlight for some special effect type of shot, but you know, for this it's not really appropriate. So you can go in here and select the type of light that you want to use, and they have Omni, which is more just like a broad, you know, if you took a Fresnel without any barn doors on it and just shined it right on the guy's face. And you can see when I move this center around, you can see the highlight just kind of over to his side. So if I move it over now to his left side here, I can actually kind of recover some of the shadow that was in his face there. And then just by way of what this effect is, it's kind of putting a little bit of a vignette on the outside edge because the light's falling off. And to me, that's probably the best of the effects for recovering a shot like this. Now you can see the before and after. You know, his face was really dark and the background was really bright, and now we've got a nice brighter face with a darker background. And then again, this kind of hinges on whether or not the subject moves in and out of the frame very much, because if he were to move his head way off to the side, you'd end up still seeing a highlight there. You can, and that's what I'm going to get to with the tracking thing in here in Premiere. So actually, that's my next little part of my demo here. So tracking is a new feature that they've added into this latest version of Premiere, into the CC 2014 version. They've added, when you put any kind of an effect onto a, just clear this out first. When you put any kind of an effect onto a clip now, you get these masks that you can draw on the screen, and then they can also track them in time. It actually took the motion tracker engine from Adobe After Effects, and they have put it into Premiere. It's not quite as sophisticated as the actual After Effects version, but you can actually get a lot done with it that saves you time from having to try to send this thing out to After Effects and open up a project and do it and round trip it back in again. So in the case here, let's say that the client looked at the shot and then after the fact said, oh, we need to take this thing here and blur this out. We need to blur this little certificate, and we need to blur this out here because it's got information that we don't want anybody to see. So it used to be you'd have to take that out to After Effects and put a matte on there. So now you can drop a Gaussian blur effect onto the clip, and you can see it hasn't done anything yet, but now when you put this effect on here, you see that you can either create an elliptical mask, a 4-point polygon, and then in this free draw Bezier just came out with the latest version of Premiere that just got released last week. So this is brand new in the 14.1 release. So in most cases here, you can get away with just using the 4-point polygon. So what it's going to do when you first click on it, it's going to give you a 4-point polygon, and you can go move it over here to your image. And let me try to blow this up a little bit so we can kind of work with it here and get it into shape. And you can now pull the handles over here and get them lined up to the edges of your subject that you're wanting to blur. And it doesn't have to be a blur effect. You can put any kind of effect you want on this. You could change this to a different color. You can you know, whatever kind of filter you can think. You could even use that lighting effect filter if you wanted to give it some sort of a highlight or something. But so now we've got this fit into place, and then we just take the Gaussian blur effect and we just start dialing it up until we get the image blurred out to suit our taste. And now you can see it's there, and you can see the edges still look crisp around it. And what's really nice about this is you can have more than one mask on the one clip. So now if we need to go and do the second one here, we just click on another mask, and it already has the blur effect applied to it since we put it onto the first mask, and kind of do the same thing here, just kind of draw that into place. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but you get the idea of, you know, what you can do. You can zoom in on it and get it really dialed in. And then, like in this case over here, we want to cover up this one, but we've got a little edge over here. You can still do that with one of these masks by actually clicking on some extra points. Let's just kind of get it dialed in. Rough for starters, but when we zoom in on this here, if you actually click on this mask now, it will add extra points to it. So it's almost like it basically turns it into this freeform Bezier kind of a thing. So now we can just kind of go around this edge, and, you know, like I said, I'm not going to make it perfectly clean right now, but you get the idea of what it can do. And, you know, now you've got 3 blurred images in your shot without having to go out to After Effects or anything. So this shot happens to be static, so oops, lost my place. So in this case, you don't really have to do anything else to them. But let's say we have a shot like this where you're on a slider, and this was actually at the sheriff's dispatch center up in Linwood. This is a suburb of LA that's, like, if you've ever been to Linwood, California, the only place that you really want to be in is the sheriff's dispatch center. I think it's like just south of Compton. So in this case, let's just say that they reviewed the footage and said, oh, you know, these 2 screens up here, we can't show the stuff that's on here. We need to blur these out. But the shot's in motion, and that would have been an After Effects shot prior to this version of Premiere, but now we can take this and do exactly what we did with the first shot with the Gaussian blur, and putting a track mat onto this first monitor here. And I'll get it roughed, and let me zoom in here to so this is where this one is not quite as perfect as what After Effects can do, because in After Effects, you know, you actually have the controls here on the corners to define the edges a lot better, where it, you know, it really wants to see contrast between the part that you're masking and the parts that are not being masked. So got to kind of get this worked into just the right spot here. And now that we have this mask set, we're on the very first frame of this clip right here. We just click on the play button, and it's going to start tracking this mask as it's moving.
Is it working on luminance values, contrast, track?
That's what I'm guessing. I mean, they never really explained. And as you can see here, it's starting to get off track a little bit, and I think it's because there's not quite enough contrast. So what you can do, and don't have enough screen real estate here to do this, is you can either go back and delete a couple of these keyframes, or you can adjust it kind of on the fly and reset it and go back and start tracking again. But see there, what just happened here? Oh, there we go. They're overlapping the keyframe thing. Yeah. Actually, let's get rid of some of that because we don't need that right now. There we go. So if you click on this, it'll start tracking it forward. It'll just keep going. If you click on this one, it does it frame by frame. So what I've noticed sometimes is I've got to kind of do them frame by frame just to kind of get them nudged into place, and then after a while it tends to find itself and will start tracking again properly. So, you know, like I said, it's not as perfect as doing it in After Effects, but you can see right now it's actually doing a pretty good job with the track right now. And it's doing it relatively quick.
Like the reality TV guys love.
Yeah.
Would you be able to substitute
Yeah, you could do, I suppose you could probably do that with another layer, and you could key something in there, probably. Yeah, you could probably put a logo or something different in there. And it does actually have some controls in here where you can have it, that's the blur thing. It's, where'd it go here? Now I'm not seeing it. Oh, tracking method right here. So it can do it with position, position rotation, position scale, and rotation. So in theory, you should be able to track an object that's coming towards you or receding back from you and changing in scale, and it should be able to adjust for that. I haven't actually done that with this yet. I've just done some basic tracks like this with it, but
Can I wrap you up fairly quickly?
yeah, I think that's what I was going to ask, if I'm doing good on time. So so you can see now that oh, I didn't actually put the blur in there yet. So add the blur and take a look at the track, and it's doing a fairly decent job. As much as I can do, just trying to show it off really fast. And you would do the same thing with this mask here. And so the last thing I was going to show video-wise on here was trying to save a shot that is overexposed and using the same tracking method and a combination of magic bullet looks. Where here's the original shot, and this was a very bad shooting day where we were out on a rainy day, so the sky was white. If it was a blue sky, we probably would have been fine, but this was not with the C100, so it was just with a standard Rec 709 type camera. So when you're trying to expose your skin tones, your highlights get totally blown out. So you initially look at the shot and think, I can't really do anything to save it, but I'll just really quickly show what I ended up doing. And I used 2 instances of magic bullet looks where I did one where I put the mask on there, and I tracked it because the shot is in motion, and it tracked it backwards, but put a graduated filter where it adjusted the exposure down a little bit just to make it look like the sky was a little darker. And then on the second one, I actually kind of took the gamma level. Yeah, you could actually do that too. You could put some blue in there if you want. And oh, nice. I guess that means that's the end of my. I guess that's the end of my demonstration. So that's a feature. So I'll reopen that and get back later. So that's the video stuff. Dave's going to come in and show some more video-related stuff, and then I think we're going to do a couple of audio things afterwards too to show how to clean some of that stuff too. So let's just I'll make a copy of that and just kind of save it for now. Of course, it lost my screen settings too, it looks like. There's Dave. Okay. I'll stall. I'm ready for you, Dave.
Dave, you're up.
Yeah, there we go. Let's keep that there for now, and you ready to go?
So while they're getting set,
Okay.
I did a project one time for a local
Oh.
broadcaster where we shot at a school that taught about art, and we went in and did all these interviews and shot all this B-roll where there was all of the kids' art all over the wall. And then when we had to cut it together, the legal side of that broadcaster went, we can't show any of that art. That would have really helped. I took a lot of stuff into After Effects and had to do a lot of motion tracking and blurring. That would have saved so much time.
I have a quick question while it's in time here. When it was Pat, right?
Yep.
When Pat was going through the different setup for color correction and stuff, I've been investigating LUTs, LUT, and I don't really fully understand what it means and how that's applied what he was doing.
And I'm probably not the guy to ask because I haven't messed with the LUTs, but I'll tell you what, I haven't messed with them much.
What are you asking about?
Well, I understand
Yeah.
it's a way to create a look with this footage, and that's what you're doing through a series of filters. Is that really all it is?
More or less. Usually what a LUT really is it's a way of telling the computer that here's what's coming in, and I want it to look this way when it's coming out. So it really works on the brightness and the color adjustments to your image. So it might say this particular shade of red when it comes in, I want it to go skew a little bit more to orange, and I don't want this brightness level to come down. So then it kind of pre-bakes on.
Is it a set of presets then? I mean,
You can-
are you gonna start seeing these things marketed?
There are a set of presets. Maybe I'll show it later once we're done with Dave's thing. There's times that they're called loop entry looks in Premiere. They're kind of based off the presets in Speed Ray, which is their software to resolve. And you use those to get pre-baked looks. And actually, the Adobe Premiere meeting I showed you, you can take the presets that you create in Magic Bullet looks for doing color correction, and then actually saving that as a LUT file, and then using that as your filter on your subsequent clips in order to save on render. The Magic Bullet looks can be pretty render intensive, but if you actually save that big look, like a light adjustment layer, and top of white footage with just that LUT file, then all of a sudden you've got a color-corrected image that takes hardly any time to render. So,
Hi, guys. Dave Schweitzer.
All right. Great color correction stuff, Pat. My thing that I was thinking of is what happens if you look behind that beautifully colored shot and you see a sign that doesn't belong there, or the model has a tattoo that nobody noticed, but you have to get out and you don't see it until you're in post. Well, that's what I was asked to show, not those shots, but the kinds of things that you discover in the edit bay that you have to, get rid of, blur out, replace text, that kind of thing. So working as a freelancer, an editor for hire, oftentimes I'll take over where other editors have started on their job. And I come in and I fix all kinds of things visually, like removing heinous facial imperfections that they forgot to cover with makeup, adding smoke, atmosphere to a scene. All this stuff can be done, a lot of the stuff can be done in Avid, in Final Cut, in Premiere. But what I'm going to be showing you in this case study is all done in After Effects. One of my clients, Digital Outpost up in Carlsbad, great bunch of people. They do a lot of good work. And what I'm going to show you now is for their client, the California Police Officers Standards Training Bureau, or POST. They do a lot of videos for police officers all over California. And they're high budget things. They have very good production value. They have great crews. They have good directors. And the stuff usually comes off really well. For whatever reason, this one that I was brought in to work on had a few things that needed blurring out, replacing, and so that's what I'm going to show you in After Effects today. So I think it's probably best to just get right into the finished product, then we'll go back and scan through it and show you the things that they wanted changed. So let's switch over to the finished product and let you take a quick break and watch this. I'll just forward this by saying the idea of this project called Courageous Conversations was the idea was to encourage officers to speak up when they see fellow officers engaged in dangerous habits using scenarios and quotations, famous quotations. So in this case, it's all about bad driving habits. And here it is.
Paul, 10-4, code 4.
15 Paul, code 4.
to go out to that house again tonight.
No, I have no idea, but I'm sure we'll be out there.
Yeah. And weren't we out there like 3 or 4?
Hey, do you want to go copy later?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'll see you.
Just let me know.
Okay.
All right. So that was pretty effective. And the great crew shot some really great footage. And it was great to work with. I picked up the edit about halfway through, did some more editing on it. And then at a certain point where they liked it, then that's when it was time to work on removing some of the things that I'm about to show you. I can tell you something else about it. Most of the time, Digital Outpost uses real police officers to act in these things, and down to their uniforms. And most of the time, they'll bring in new patches and cover up their municipalities, or they'll put a magnet on the car door to cover up where the police cars were from. In this case, they were from Carlsbad, and they have their own fictitious generic police department. But for some reason, they forgot some of those things, or maybe the patches weren't working on the jackets. So they did some things with board tape on the police officers' jackets, and you'll get to see that now. I'll go ahead and kind of run through this a little quicker. Let me drop this into VLC. And then you can show some of the challenges I was able to work on. Let's just drag this. Open with. Well, maybe I can just step through it this way. All right, so I'll stop in a couple spots to show you what I had to deal with. First of all, they didn't have the right patches, so they put some board tape over the municipality on the shoulder, which was pretty obvious. This was all the same, and then we get down here, and there it is. There was my thing. Look at that. That tape is pretty heinous. So they had me cover that up. I think it was Riverside Police or something like that. So the first challenge was to hide the tape. Then, you ever get something back with a real live phone number in the background or a real live logo? They didn't want to give free advertising to the realtors, and they tend to not want to put real phone numbers up on things. So one of the things I was challenged with was to replace that. Also, taking Carlsbad off the squad cars. Hey, all right. Yeah. So we also had some text that we made part of the shot just by writing it on, moving it around. Then back here, they shot this, as you can probably tell, on a really cloudy, almost rainy day. I think it was rainy. Yeah.
Okay.
But they shot the pickups and the on-purpose shot, the jib shot for the effect, intentional visual effects, on a day that wasn't quite so. So the shot, as you can see, it's cloudy, but it's really blue. So one of the things I thought I would do is try and make that look gray and ugly. And then finally, at the end here, I was tasked with removing Carlsbad from all the cars, so why not do this one too? So depending on what kind of time we have here, let's see what I can work through. The first thing was probably at the beginning, one of the easier ones that I thought would be good to work on was the badges working on the shoulders. Here he is. So we have, what I did here was to instead of masking it and replacing it with a solid color, I thought it might be fun to key out all the grays in the shot. And what I did was, here we go. So I did a luma key. I selected the gray, the white and the gray in this area, and keyed everything out of the shot that was that color. Looking underneath it, you can see the comp in the background is green. So see what you're seeing is showing through. It's transparent. And I thought it would be pretty easy to just go ahead and stick a gray solid behind there. So we're cutting out the selection that I luma keyed out. We're looking through the patch to this solid back here. But of course, we don't want to take out. I didn't want to take out the helmets and everything else. So this is where I did a little bit of masking. Pat was talking about masking earlier. He kind of showed you what a mask was. I thought that it would be good to just define it. Really, masking is drawing a shape that will be used to add video in that shape, or to remove video from the scene within that shape, or to hide part of your video while revealing another. And in this case, my mask was basically removing the key everywhere except in the middle of this blue mask. So as you can see here, let me turn on the layer. The layer above here is okay, this top layer that we're looking at is it's cutting a hole. I've overlaid the entire video across the top, untreated. I'm cutting a hole in it, subtracting what's in the middle of it, so that you're seeing through it to the key job below. Let me turn that back on. So I'm cutting a hole out, looking through to the key beneath it. And that's what the mask is allowing me to do. It's allowing me to not have to key out the helmets and everything up here, or the highlights here in the middle, which are kind of the same color. But it's a combination of masking and keying to get rid of the offensive item. And this was enough to fool the client, so we went with it.
That's a really cool approach to doing it.
Yeah, you know, there's several different ways to do anything. And so this was one way. So it's keying, it's luma keying, I believe it's luma keying, let's see. And it's limiting that effect. You have a modifier key to get my F3, to get the F keys, there it is, function. Yeah, it's a luma key. So I'm keying out the brighter colors in the shot, and then I'm masking everything else out and only showing that part. So that's how that is fixed. Well, what you're looking at, over everything outside of this blue mask is the unadulterated output of the edit, which, if I turn off the mask, includes the board tape. It's just laying across the top. So underneath that, on this layer down here, keyed, let me turn off the solid in the back. The layer underneath, layer 2, has this luma key on it, and I'm punching a hole through all the gray in that shot. So we're seeing through it, in this case to the bottom, or if you like the checkerboards, it's invisible. And then I just color matched the area around the badge and made this solid down here. And I don't even think I moved it. It just pretty much stayed right there, because that's where the hole kind of drifted around. So that's one way to take care of that.
Did the mask animate by itself? Did you have to
No, it did not. See all these? You see all these keyframes here? I've been doing this a while, and I prefer to. I rely on you know, well brute force. You know, that classical hand tool techniques of just moving it by hand. So every one of these guys is a slight adjustment. Now, mind you, the whole shot is only about 6 or 7 seconds. So I set up the mask initially, went a little while until it needed to be changed, and then I keyframed it. Just grabbed this guy, and let's say in the middle here, you grab your mask and make an adjustment to it, and then a new keyframe will come up. So it automatically remembers that movement, and then it continues back to where it was. So yeah, it's just, you know, the old ways. There are lots of good reasons to use motion tracking. Most of the time, whenever I try and do it, I find it quicker to rely on my old ways. So I end up using the brute force method.
Motion tracking really worked so well in that case, right? Because the badge is going underneath the shoulder.
True. Yeah. And there's other software for tracking. After Effects now comes with this program called Mocha that I think we talked about a while back. It tracks a little differently to things that aren't on screen. I haven't learned it yet. You know, mostly I'm an editor. I get into this stuff because it needs doing and I enjoy it. But as I may have mentioned before, a lot of this stuff can be done within Avid. A lot of it can be done within Premiere. But this gave me a little bit more control.
Is there a plugin in After Effects that could, with that patch, that could make it kind of move and fold like the rest of the leather jacket does?
I bet I'd like to throw that out to everybody. I bet there may be something like Zaxworks. They have like a flag plug-in that can kind of make things wavy, that kind of stuff. Yeah. This, as I said before, this fooled the client well enough, and we got it out the door for this shot. So let's see what else can I show you. This one was the signage shot in the background here. Let me turn this off. Earlier, you may have seen that it was car door. Let me turn it back on. Where are we? Where's the base layer? Right here? No, that's not it. Okay. By the way, I worked on this back in November of last year, so it takes a little while. So here we have the Cassidy Turley sign we wanted to get rid of, cover that up. I found since the shot, luckily the shot is lock off. I didn't have to do much with it. I actually went to Photoshop, I believe. Or did I? No, I did it all in here. It's a discovery for all of us. I went through here and I may have just screwed everything up. But I typed everything in. That was oh, I see what happened. Something moved. Yeah. This will work. All right, smoke them if you got them. Hey, that was quick. All right, so let's go back to the signage. There we go. So this was relatively simple, going through and drawing new shapes and replacing the text, what was there before, with this. And if there's any, and I like to be a little funny about it. I don't know if anybody can figure out where those names come from, but yeah. So there's that. It's a New York phone number. The other thing that's going on in here is we are getting rid of Carlsbad off the doors. The way we did this was, let me see if I don't screw anything up here. Let me turn off the sign. That's good enough. And go down to the door. Okay, this was just to door right, door left. Yeah, I'll show you that in a different, it's been a long time. I'll show it to you in a different comp. Let me go down to the end and show you this one. Okay. Yeah. All right, now can we get closer? So we had Carlsbad up here on the doors several times. There's some keyframes. Are those the ones I want? Okay, that's actually post. Yay, I'm finding my way around. Okay, there we go. That's what we did, what I did. So matching the shot, which is down here. Or is it? That's embarrassing. If there was a shot underneath here, the actual jib shot of the door, you would see that I have a solid that basically I'm tracking over time, manually, brute force, over the Carlsbad in the door. Why don't I have that here to show you? There's that. The finished product. Okay. I guess I could show you something else in this project. But the idea here, if we look at these solids, is that, if I can time this right, pretty close. The solid follows, and it's just a gray solid with a blurred feathered edge, and it follows and covers this logo up as it goes up. All right. Nothing like losing stuff in front of people, but there you are. But even a little more interesting for this scene, I thought, was the beginning. Replacing the sky, making it look darker. So let's go to that. This may sound silly, but does anybody have any questions about how this was done? This stuff here?
Did you then just key the green out?
No, in this case, I just overlaid across the top a piece of gray with a feathered edge and adjusted it using hand-tooled, classical, well-worn methods of moving masks.
The green was the background color in the other column.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't a layer.
Right. It was just the background. Yeah. This method does not have any keying. It's just overlaying some gray across the top of the shot to hide Carlsbad. But
Can I interject something?
please, yes.
When you are outputting something with an alpha channel, like a lower third or a title, and you have a green as your background color in the comp, the alpha channel will come out with, wherever it's transparent, a little bit of red because it's opposite the green. If you, before you render out, turn your background color to off or to transparency, it won't affect the color of the transparency of the alpha channel.
That's what they call pre-multiplying, right? Did you mention that? Yeah, it's when you're rendering out, always render out straight your alpha so it doesn't combine that color, unless you want that. Some people might. Okay, so this last bit right here, this is our shot, our nice jib shot, before and after. All I really had to do here was some more masking. I wanted to get that sky really dark. So I went ahead and duplicated my layer, masked around here with a nice Bezier mask, a little soft feathered edge, and then I darkened it with brightness and contrast filter. Also the color balance, I played with the hue a little bit, made it darker. Wanted to get it kind of more bluish, but dark. That's the original. And then the sky is dark here. But I also thought I could use a little more of a kick and something a little less obvious too. This is pretty, this by itself I thought was a bit much. But in looking at the previous shot of the officer from the other angle in the sky and everything around him, I thought a nice washout on the whole shot would be helpful too. So this is just the entire shot underneath the masked out shot with a color adjustment on it. So I'm washing out the entire shot once, but going that extra step of masking this guy out, and then when the door opens, just going right along with it. Here we are. And so this is a technique, again, masking things out and changing them, that it'll allow you in post to really make some adjustments to get that effect you're looking for. I don't know if when they shot this, they realized that it was not a rainy day, or maybe they just figured, hey, we'll fix it in post. We'll bring somebody in.
Dave, just that little piece, how long does that take?
To come up with the
thinking
idea?
Doing,
Yeah.
just for that one piece, I mean, they get it done.
I think so. I mean,
The hour?
yeah, I'm always on the hour, by the hour. But thinking back to November, December of last year, I'm thinking probably 2 or 3 hours just to come up with an approach for each one, try something out, see if it's enough, add a little bit more on there. That might be accurate. It might be underestimating it. I don't know. One thing I can say, budgetarily speaking, it's a lot cheaper to have one guy and After Effects in a room for a day or 2 or 3 than it might be to bring the crew, a whole film crew back, and the cast and the actors. So this kind of fix it and post idea, it's also it can be a real money saver if you're planning to fix it in post ahead of time. Yeah.
When you're muscling your way through that,
Mhm.
How many frames were the keyframe?
Yeah.
For that one?
I depending on how much is moving, how much movement there is in a shot, I tend to go 10 frames ahead and see what's changed, make a keyframe, go in between, because After Effects is always, it's doing the math and it's extrapolating the differences between keyframe A and B. Yeah, sometimes it's going to miss something. So then where it misses, I just plug in the middle and make another keyframe, go back and forth and see what happens.
So you tried 10 at a time?
Yeah, pretty much. And again, it's one of those things where me doing that is faster than an old dog learning to use new tricks really well. Me doing the motion tracker and letting it, do all the math. Because most of the time, for me, and it's just me, it's a little quicker this way.
And also, for those of you that are new to keyframing, always start breaking things in half and working towards the middle. So keyframe here.
Yeah.
And then, if you need another keyframe, put it in the middle. And then, if you need a keyframe here, put it in the middle. Since it's extrapolating from keyframe to keyframe, if you're going one frame at a time and adding keyframes, you're adding way more keyframes than you need. So always working towards the middle.
Yeah.
In between them.
Okay. Another thing I can show a difference in is the ticket. This was just a nice little ad. How do we get the quotes on screen to look dynamic? So in this case, the original piece was shot and held live by the actor. We went back and got the right stuff filled in on the tickets, and went about replacing a line. Is it Meyer? Yeah, it's Meyer that we want to use. So in this case, in Avid, I lined the footage up where I wanted it, exported a Photoshop file of that image. It's just a still image, but it gives me the space I need to write what I need to write, and it framed really nicely. So I brought that Photoshop image in as my background, and let's see. Okay, to give it realism, I went ahead and added I used the wiggler, which kind of randomizes motion in the shot in your image, whether it's video, whatever you're moving around. It gives it random up, down, left, right movement. You can tell it how many times to move this way or that way, and again, set your 2 keyframes, and it'll randomly do how much motion you want the thing to wiggle. Very fun. So I wiggled this around, and then I did the type separately as this layer. So the word courage, these are all type layers done here in After Effects. I had courage. I didn't really have the time to have it right on, but if you wipe something on with a soft edge fast enough, it gets the point across. So I wiped on courage in the appropriate location, which is here. And let's turn that back on. So all the animation of the revealing of the type is happening in this type composition, a separate composition. It wipes on, and then at the same time as the other lines come up from nothingness, I threw a blur on this layer down here to time it. And lastly, to make it look like it's kind of part of the image a little bit more, I locked the type composition to the ticket book layer down below, what they call parenting. So whatever move that the ticket book does, the type layer will do the same thing. Bring it in, turn on. Without parenting, the background may move around. You might not really see it, but the type doesn't. So turn parenting on, and like I was saying, any motion that happens below will affect the whole thing, and it makes it look like the guy's holding it, and the client loved it, so that's what matters. And so these are a few different ways that I was able to get rid of bad tape jobs, to replace some text in the background that you didn't really want to pay somebody to use their. Heck, I guess the idea was they just didn't want to give anybody a chance to call the number to see if it was real. And then through a couple of different methods, changing out the sky color somewhat. And that's pretty much it. So with After, hey, thank you.
Questions, anyone? If not, I'll do some audio stuff.
Woohoo! This just scratches the surface of what After Effects can do.
Have that handwritten text plug in effectively?
Not as easy as that,
Okay.
but the way I've always done it is you can. I think it's a path right on. Oh, sure. Yeah, you can quit that. Is to is to make a path for each letter. So you create your letter in whatever font you use, and I think it's using the path, right on a path. I forgot what the thing is, but anyways, you make a path over your letters and then reveal a stroke on that path as it goes. It's a couple of different layers. It's not as easy as it can be. Yeah. Ah, right. Yeah, same idea. Very cool. Yeah, I guess that's about it for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Schweitzer. So I had some video stuff, but since we've been doing all this video stuff, why don't we do a little audio stuff? This is a quick snippet of a short film that I just edited. I'm going to turn this adjustment layer off real quick so that we don't have to render so much. And one of the things that you'll run into when doing filmic stuff is you may be stretching audio around, you may be cutting from one mic to the other, so you're going to have problems where audio just kind of goes away. So you're going to have to find something to unify all of that audio so it kind of sounds the same. So if you listen to this is going to be hard because the speakers are pointing that way. If you listen to this, you'll hear some sections where the audio just kind of dies out.
That's what all the guys say.
What? Nothing, just go back to that.
When you called, you must have had something in mind, didn't you?
I just want to know if I can afford it.
Some things are priceless.
You are absolutely gorgeous, and I just need to know how much you want before we can get started.
Well, you must have been thinking of something to pay. Just say the word.
Damn it, stop fooling around. Get to the exchange. Oh, hands on her. Put them on. Touch her. Touch her.
So you can hear in a couple of sections here, like especially right in here, you'll hear that the background, everything just kind of goes away. And the reason for that is that we wanted to add, we being me and the director, wanted to add some more time on this reaction shot. And to do that, we had to stretch it. So the audio had to go away because he actually, in this shot, if you look at the shadow of his face here, you'll actually see him do the same thing because we had to stretch that shot. Right now, he's shaking his head and delivering the line. Cut back to him. That's actually where the line was delivered. So we had to stretch that out. So I couldn't have his audio still be there because he would be saying the line there. So now, if you notice, all the audio goes away.
You are absolutely.
So how do you solve that problem? Well, you need something to unify all of that audio. And one of my favorite tricks to use is to just use room tone to unify that audio. If you're working with a really good sound guy, they will always give you room tone, right? If you're working with a really bad audio guy, tell him to get you room tone, right? And in worst case scenario, if you wind up with absolutely nothing, in Final Cut 10, it comes stock with some of these little sound effects. Just go in there and type room, and you're going to get a whole bunch of different room tones, right? This may be a little loud, right? Just a little room tone. Some are a little more, yeah, some are a little more mechanical than others. In this case, we're going to use this room tone 1. So I'm just going to drag it in here, drop it underneath this scene. Where's that scene transition? Right there. Okay, so we're going to drop it underneath this scene. Oh, it's so tough working on this little tiny monitor. because I have to squish everything down, right? And I'm just going to bring the level down a little bit, and then just, and again, this is going to be really difficult for me because the speakers are pointing at you.
When you called, you must have had something in mind, didn't you?
I just want to know if I can afford it.
Some things are priceless.
You are absolutely gorgeous.
Right? You don't notice that dropout as much. It unifies it. Your ear now doesn't notice the difference. You probably heard a little bit of a drop in it. Like I said, I can't hear very well from being back here. So I'm just gonna select a little range here. And I'm just gonna bump that little section up just a touch. I don't know if this is gonna be more than I need or not, because again, I can't hear with the speakers facing the other way.
Some things are priceless.
You are absolutely gorgeous.
So again, it just unifies the audio. You don't hear that dropout because you've added something into it to make it all kind of sound the same. Another trick that you can use that unfortunately is very difficult to do within Final Cut, but if I was to take this and export it out to Logic or to Pro Tools, another thing you can use to unify audio is stuff like reverb. Just throw a little reverb on everything. Take all of that dialogue, send it to a submix, and throw a little reverb on it. Just make it kind of have something in there that's the same so that your ear doesn't notice the difference. So that's a little trick there. I'll also show you a couple other small tricks that I always do to audio. Let's grab this little interview here. If you notice up here, you see these little things on the wall. I was actually going to show you how to get rid of those if we have time. I'll still do that. So if you listen to his audio, it's just straight raw audio right out of the camera. Audio out of the camera is always going to be up and down because people don't always talk at the same level. They're going to talk really loud, and it usually happens at the beginning of where they're answering the question, and then they're going to start to trail off. And then all of a sudden, all of your audio tracks look like they have a wedge on them from keyframes. So one thing that can help you with that is a simple compressor. So if we go into our effects, we go over here to our audio effects and go to levels, you have a simple compressor. Once that compressor's on it, if you go to the audio tab, and I am going to make my meters just a little bit bigger, I think. No, I can't even do that because I'm out of screen real estate. I usually run compressors, the ratio around 3:1. And just so you have an idea, what a compressor does is it takes all of those highs and it brings them down and then allows you to take everything and bring it up. So it takes the dynamic range of the audio that might be like this and brings it like this, right? So things are more uniform all the way across as far as volume goes. So right now we're gonna.
Tell them it's kind of like an automatic level control where somebody would
Yeah.
be writing the fader, but it's only happening when the volume gets past a certain point, which is when the threshold level is on there. Then if you kind of go above that, then it brings it down by the ratio that you see.
Right, and that threshold he's talking about is here. So anything over 20 dB is going to go down 3:1.
Final Cut 10, do you tend to use the audio enhancements up there? Or?
Yes. I actually, I tend to drop under the voice section, there's one called voiceover enhancement. I tend to drop that one on because it gives me both a compressor and an equalizer because that's where I'm going to go next. I'm not doing it right here because there's no way to toggle it on and off, and I want you to be able to hear the difference. Oh, yeah. The only one of those that I tend to use is noise reduction. The noise reduction works really well, but I haven't like tried to use the loudness, and because it's a little too automatic. Like the loudness is basically in the background throwing a compressor on, but I don't really have control over it like I do here. So I'll set my ratio at like 3:1, and I can adjust this on the fly. So I'm going to start playing, and I'm just going to start bringing my gain up.
I wanted to learn programming.
I don't want to blast you guys out. Until my peaks down here, I usually bring it up till they're about -6. It depends on,
Looking around quickly, you realize a common.
as far as levels go, it really depends on what you're working on. If you're working on something with broadcast specs, you're going to have specs that say, audio has to be at, -20 with no peaks over -18, things like that. I tend to work at around -6 for corporate stuff. If you're going to go to YouTube, feel free to crank that crap as high as you can, because that's what people are going to do when they go to YouTube, right? As long as it's not hitting 0, as long as it's not in the red, you're golden. So crank it up.
On your graph, though, it does appear that you are clipping, at least Final Cut things, you're up in the yellow and red on the clip audio waveform down there. So you're really just looking at the true meters over there.
Yeah, that's what's giving me. Oh, hold on, what happened there? I must have bumped that while we were yakking.
It was not all that relevant in the everyday conversations.
Yeah, that's a little better. I must have bumped it while we were yakking. But yeah, it's going to show me that there's a little bit in the yellow, and sometimes it might even show you that there's a little bit in the red. I'm not really concerned about that. What I'm more concerned about is what's going on over here, right? Those are my meters.
We've also found that those can be pretty deceptive depending on how much you're zooming in on your clip.
Mm-hmm.
If you really smash it down, it will look like you have more rest than you really do.
Yep. The other thing that I always apply to voice or dialogue is an EQ, because there's a couple of things that I want to do to it. Get out of there. So I'm going to go over here and get a channel EQ and drop it on. I'm going to click up here to get my channel EQ controls. The first thing I'm going to do, okay, human voice is going to fall around the 300 up to 4 to 5K. That's the range of the human voice. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the low end, right? I'm going to bring that up to about 80 or so. Actually, before I do that, I'll do it in real time so you can kind of hear the difference. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut the bottom end out.
This was, I wanted to learn.
There's stuff down there I don't need.
The way of the future.
Now I'm going to cut the top end out.
Where internet was not all that relevant in the everyday conversations. And looking around quickly, you realize that Coleman was.
So you kind of hear the difference. It's slight,
teaching,
but there's a difference. I'm hoping you can hear it because I can't hear it from the back of these speakers. The next thing I'm going to do is every room has a resonance to it. It has a certain frequency that's just a little wonky, right? And you can find that frequency in the room. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a dot and I'm going to drag it up. And then I'm going to take the Q, which is so this is looking at the frequencies from 20 hertz up to 20,000 hertz, 20 kilohertz, right? So I'm going to notch out a little chunk just by pulling what's called the Q down on this adjustment. So right now, this adjustment is affecting from about 100 hertz all the way up to 10 kilohertz. I'm going to take the Q down nice and narrow, right? Now I'm going to play this, and I'm going to scrub through, and I'm going to try and find that room frequency. And you'll hear it.
I wanted to learn programming. This was the way of the future back then, programming or internet was not all that relevant.
You hear how it's got that weird kind of tinny crap in it? That's the resonance of the room, and you want to get that out of there. So how you do it is just take that notch and pull it straight down.
It was the only one at the time.
And again, here's the difference.
This was the way of the future back then, programming or internet was not all that relevant.
It's kind of faint, but it's a difference.
Looking around quickly, you realize that Coleman was really one.
Now, the last thing I do with EQ is the reason that English speech is recognizable is frequencies on the high end, consonants. Those are the things that allow us to understand what's being said. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bump the high end just a bit. This is also really helpful for old guys like me that are almost 50, because those are the frequencies that go away, especially when I was a drummer for a long time and played in clubs and it was really loud. So usually female voices are around 4K to 5K, male voices 3K to 4K. So all I'm gonna do is just bump those frequencies up a bit.
It was the only one at the time. This was, I wanted to learn programming.
Do you hear how you start to hear those consonants a little bit better?
Not all that prevalent in the everyday conversations.
I'll pull it back out.
And looking around quickly, you
I'll
realize
bring it
that
back in.
Coleman was really one of the few colleges that was.
Do you hear the difference?
Teaching, it was the only one at the time.
So that's the 3 little tricks that I always use on audio. Put that compressor on, put the EQ on, and the three Q tips on the EQ. Cut the high end and the low end. You don't need it. Find that room and pull the room out, and then bump those high end up just a little bit, so it becomes more recognizable. Robin.
If your music seems to be competing, especially, would you also try to EQ the music to drop out? So
that's where I'm going to go next. Yes, if you have a piece of music under this, let me just grab some music from over here. It's going to yell at me because I'm going to be cutting from one to the other. What is this? That one's not really good because it's... Okay, we're going to make them funky. Right, so we'll throw this under there. This is a really good trick for... Yeah, I know I'm editing between. I want to. Let me do it. So here's a really good trick for helping you keep your music up and not compete so much with your voice. Because I hate it when I send something to a client and they go, take the music down. I can't, it needs to go down more, and it needs to go down more. And they take it down so damn much that it loses all emotion, right? Because in video, your voice is the data, the information, the music is the emotion. And when you pull it down so much, it just loses all emotion. So one of the tips that you can do to help you keep that music up, I'm just going to get a level first.
It was the only one at the time. This was, I wanted to...
I'm going to take our friend the channel EQ and drop that on to my video. We'll bring up the channel EQ. And you remember I said that the human voice is around 200-300 up to 4-5K. Well, all we're going to do is we're going to pull those frequencies down just a little bit in our music. So we're going to come into here, and we're just going to drag this down. We're going to drag this down up to about 5K. We're basically digging out a channel for our music. I don't want the cue, right? And I usually go, about 3 dB with this stuff.
Are you adjusting the music down right now or the voice down?
I'm not adjusting volume on anything. I'm just EQing the music, right? And I'm basically, again, just pulling out those frequencies that are within the human vocal range.
It was the only one at the time.
That's with it on?
I wanted to learn programming. This was the way
That's with it off.
Back then, programming or internet was not all that.
Do you hear a difference on it?
In everyday conversations.
I hope you can, because I'm behind it. I can't hear it that well.
You realize that Coleman was really one of the few colleges.
And you can pull more and more of that out up here. You can adjust it as you go. I basically, once I set that, I saved it off as a default. So in my channel EQ settings here, I have actually I have 2, one called music and one called music channel. And those are basically just digging that channel out for the voice. So that's what I do with music every time I use music. Give your voice room within the music to be heard. Time is it? 5 minutes. Do you guys want to see the motion track of the cover up of these things? Or do we want to call it quits? Cover them up? Okay, so this was an interview that I shot for another local broadcaster, and These things in the background originally had a bunch of cables hanging off of them, so we pulled all the cables off when we shot it. Thought, well, that would be okay, because I don't really want to leave like holes and start taking stuff off of their walls. But of course, when the client looked at it, they came back and said, no, we want to get rid of the cable racks too. And of course, this has also been shot floaty cam, so it's not like we can just tack something up there and leave it. Now we're in motion track world. So the first thing that you're going to do, actually, I don't even need to arrange it. I'm just going to export this out.
Would it have been possible to export all the frames out and then in Photoshop try to use some sort of preset to apply a healing patch tool or something to all the frames?
Well, you don't need to do it to the frames. You can do it to just the video.
Oh, okay.
So let me export this out. Movies for AE. I actually already have one in there because I was playing with it earlier to make sure I remembered how to do this. This was another one that was a while ago. So let me save this out. And then I'm actually going to quit Final Cut 10. I've noticed that After Effects and Final Cut 10 working at the same time sometimes is not the greatest. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to take it into Photoshop. Oops, sorry, I need to go back into here. I need to export a still frame out to take into Photoshop, which I actually may have already done. So the first thing I'm going to do is find where it's the most in the frame, right? Where those two little racks are the most in the frame, rack holders. And I'm going to export a still frame out here. And let's go to Images for AE. And we're going to call this Rack Cover. New. I'm going to put new on everything, because if not, I'm going to confuse myself. Save that out. All right. Now we're going to go into Photoshop.
Mike, is there a reason why you picked Ping and not TIFF or something else?
I got kind of used to using pings at a point when they started handling alpha channels just by themselves. I didn't have to think about it. I mean, I came from an old world where you had to take things into Photoshop and create TIFFs, but then also create an alpha channel underneath them for alpha channel stuff, and now it just has it, right? So that's why I started using them. So we're going to open this with Photoshop. And again, one of the keys here is to get it when it's the most in frame. Get that as far in frame as you can. Oh, and this is going to be odd because it's on a very small screen. Will the auto size button actually? Yay, we'll do it that way. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just create a image with these gone, right? And the way we're going to do that is with the clone stamp tool. So we'll just grab some area up here, and then we're just going to kind of paint over the top of this, get rid of that. Maybe grab something down here just to kind of break it up a little bit. Grab something here. No, that's probably a little too bright. And I'm grabbing from a lot of different areas just to kind of give it that random look, because as you can tell just from looking at this, we had when we shot it on site, we had a cookie that we were shooting through, right? That was our Cucalora, so it gave us this pattern on the wall.
You know, the content aware replace is pretty amazing these days.
Content aware replace.
Content aware.
Wow, you guys are much better at Photoshop than I am. So now we're going to save this out. And yeah, we'll call this fixed new. No compression. All right, now we're gonna quit out of Photoshop. No, we don't need to save that. We already saved the fixed version. Let's go quit Final Cut and into After Effects. First thing you do, save the project. How do I know that? Because I have worked along on a project that was never saved and had that son of a bitch crash about 2 hours into it. And that's the day I regretted that I quit sniffing glue. And where were we working at? Here, I'm trying to be a jokester instead of paying attention. AE comps, we'll call this rack cover new. Save, we'll just replace it. All right, so now let's go get our assets. So we're going to import from our movies for AE. We're going to import that movie that we exported out of Final Cut. And we are going to import from our images for AE the rack cover new image that we made. So now let's take the movie, drop it on our timeline, and let's fill this. Wow, why did that movie go away? Why did I export a bunch of stuff I didn't need? Yeah, it doesn't matter. We'll go back to here. So we're going to stack it with the movie on the bottom layer. Above that, we're going to have the still that we made. For now, we're going to turn that still off. We're going to go to where it's the most in frame again. Actually, we don't have to from here. We're going to go to the movie and we're going to track something in this, right? And tracking works on luminance values. So we can actually use that rack to track it out. And I'm actually going to do this. So let's go to our tracker. And we're going to track motion. It is so hard on this little tiny monitor in 4x3. And I'm going to take our tracker, slide it up here, and kind of find the corner of that, right? And set our tracker. And then we're just going to tell the tracker, track. That's what you do, track. So it's going to go through and it's going to track the motion. Now, once it tracks the motion, we're going to have to apply that motion to a layer. And the first thing that you think is, well, we're just going to apply it to the layer, that image layer, right? Because that's what we want to track over it. That's actually not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to add a new null. And I usually name these just track null. And this is the layer that we want to put the track on. So we'll go up to our target for our track, and we're going to put it on the track null and say OK. Now at this point, you'll notice that that track null is moving along with the track. Now we're going to go to where we're the most in frame again. We'll turn our image layer on. And I'll give it a little bit of transparency so you can kind of see what's going on here. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Glad you guys are keeping track of me here. Yeah. Let's just replace that layer. All right. So now you can see just from me playing with the transparency here, you can see that that's the top layer, and I'm going to pull the transparency out. That's the movie, right? I usually kind of keep it about 50% so I can see kind of where his head is. And now I'm going to cut a mask on this top layer so that I only have that part that's covered, and that's covering those racks. And when you cut a mask on something like this, the human eye is really good at picking out lines. So don't just grab your rectangle tool and just drag a rectangular line around it, because your eye is going to pick it out. So I just go up and get the Bezier tool and just kind of make just, you know, random little kind of wavy thing. The eye is going to have a whole lot harder time picking that out. Now we're going to turn it up to 100%. I'm going to turn the mask edges off so that you don't see the mask edges. As you can see, this is kind of not that great because there's a little bit of color difference. The mask is also pretty harsh, so we'll feather out that mask a little bit. And then the other thing I'm going to do is go into this layer, and I'm going to apply an effect called curves. And it's in color correction under curves. And I'm just going to start adjusting down on this just to kind of make it a little bit darker so it kind of bleeds in, right? So now we've covered them. Problem is, yeah, it's getting all over his face and all that crap, right? Well, we already have tracks that we put in on that null object. So at this point, we're just going to grab the parent whip and we're going to track it. We're going to parent that layer to the null, because the null's already tracked and the null's already moving around. So now that top layer is going to, what? It's going to make a liar out of me is what it's going to do. Did I apply the track to the null? Did I target it? It always works in practice. Yeah, exactly. This is what happens when you're talking at the same time, right? So let's go back down to the tracker. I will fix your little red wagon. Let's get rid of that tracker. Let's just track it again. Let's turn that off. We're going to track motion. We're going to track this one more time. The track null is going to be the target. Track, 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 away we go. Wow, it seems to be tracking faster this time. I wonder why. Maybe because I'm zoomed in on the screen and it's only showing me a little bit. All right, now we're going to make sure that it's set to the track null, which it is. We're going to apply it to the track null. Okay, now that's parented. It's totally making a liar out of me, isn't it? Again, I'm glad you guys are in this room with me. You're keeping me on track. All right, so it's there, but it moved it off and off to the top. You see it way up here? That's one of the reasons why we use this null, because now we can also have independent adjustment of this layer, right? So I can bring this layer down, I can move it around. If I don't kind of like the way that it's lining up on the background, I can kind of move it a little bit, but it's still gonna stay with it. And I haven't adjusted any keyframes on the layer that's covering it because there is no keyframes there. All the keyframes are on that null, and this is parented to the null. So it kind of gives me two handles to work with, right? This handle can move around, but this one can as well. So when you're doing your tracks, don't track to the layer, track to a null, parent the layer to the null so that it moves around. Does that all make sense? That's all I've got for you, kids. And thanks for paying attention when I was screwing everything up.
Are there any questions for our speakers? Come on. Nobody's even curious? All right. Well, thank you very much. Pat, Dave, Mike, thank you very much. Yes, yes.
So what's one thing that you wouldn't try to fix in post?
What's one thing that I wouldn't? I can tell you some of the things that I can't fix in post, and most of them are audio. If you clip your audio when you're recording, sorry, you're screwed. We're gonna have to go to ADR, right? We're gonna have to do dialogue replacement because I can't fix clipped audio. Does everybody know what clipped audio is? Once it gets past 0, it gets crackly. That's clipped audio. Once you clip it, there's nothing I can do. Maybe Joe Godfrey's got some magic pixie dust that he can sprinkle on it, but not me.
Working on it.
Are you?
Aren't there some sound labs or sound engineer groups that are trying to figure out how to, create software or hardware that analyzes clipped audio and then can bring it down or something?
I'm sure there are. And the other thing on the video side, when it comes to color correction, if you blow the whites out and there's no detail up in the whites, there's nothing I can do to bring it back. Once it's gone, right?
If it's not in focus, we can't make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go the other way around.
Yeah. There's some sharpen, I'm sure all of us that are now editors working in the HD world, you can use sharpen filters to kind of bring back stuff that's just a touch out of focus. But if you go past, go reshoot.
Also, echo rooms.
What's that?
Heavy echo rooms.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, I was reading something recently about somebody that's working on, there's some plugin that people are talking about, and
RX4.
Is it RX4 that will do it? Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting ready to pull the trigger on RX4, but it's like $1,000. Isotope. It's like $1,000 worth of plugin. It's not cheap.
Has anybody worked with GoPro Hero 3 Plus or Hero 4 Plus with their Cine look or Cinetune, ProTune? Yeah. Has anybody worked with that?
I've worked with ProTune a little bit, but not much.
Any tips on making it look as good as possible?
Color correct it?
What's happening is when you're using ProTune, it's kind of flattening out the image, similar to when I was showing the stuff I shot in vlog with the Canon C100, where it's trying to take the highlight detail and giving you a little bit more latitude. So when you get the footage, it's going to look pretty flat and dull, and you need to go in and use the color correction tools and pull the black level back down, and pull the whites back up and add some color.
Saturation. I just found just like 5% of mid lift and 50% up on saturation looks absolutely incredible. I wanted to hear what anybody.
Anytime you get footage that looks really flattened out, look at it in a waveform monitor, and you'll see, because waveform is from 0 to 100, right? And if it's all in here, that's log, baby. You got to start stretching that stuff out. Pull those blacks down, push those whites up, and never, ever, ever, ever let anything go out of your edit bay without color correcting. Please, don't do that.
I'm going to interrupt. We can keep this discussion going, but the students have to leave, and so I want to do the giveaway before they go so that they have a chance to win it. This is Learning Pro Tools 11 by author Joe Godfrey.
For $29.95, Joe will sign that for you.
So here's the trivia question. The first person to shout out the answer wins. One of my favorite movies, even for the sound mix and the music, is Men in Black. Who directed it? Schumacher. Who was that? There's a winner.
We have a winner.
Very honest girl. Okay, back to question.